Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show. The new normal. We've been hearing a lot about the new normal in 2020. COVID-19 and Black Lives Matter mean that the old normal is gone, pushed aside. Ash heap of history. So what's the new normal? Well, it's not looking very good so far. Let's go to cases here. This is from the Daily Mail. And it begins, a shocking photo has emerged showing a woman performing a sex act in the street in the Upper West Side, in another alarming indication of how one of New York City's wealthiest neighborhoods is being overtaken by crime and homelessness. In a disturbing picture shared on Twitter, the woman can be seen crouching down while apparently performing oral sex on a shirtless man near West 79th Street and Broadway around 9 p.m. on Sunday. She also appears to be undressed from the waist down with her pants around her knees. The photo comes as little surprise to many New Yorkers who have witnessed a surge in crime and homelessness in their neighborhoods, prompting them to leave the city after an initial wave of people fled as the coronavirus pandemic began. Wealthy New Yorkers relocated upstate or to Long Island, like Jerry Seinfeld, it would appear, while many Americans fled cities to states with more space, such as Vermont, Idaho, and Oregon. Actually, Vermont is a very tiny state compared to New York State. The trend has left 13,000 empty apartments for rent in Manhattan as of mid-August, the highest number in 14 years, triggering a surge in inventory and slump in rental prices. Someone called Save the Upper Side tweeted, "Is oral sex the compassion needed? Quality of life no longer exists on the Upper West Side. Would you want your children to see this on Broadway?" I don't know. Given what I read about children's television these days, I suspect that quite a few members of the elite would want children to see this. They would consider it to be a learning experience, a teachable moment, as they like to say. A witness who took the photo told the Daily Mail the woman had removed her pants to relieve herself on the sidewalk during the encounter. Gets classier and classier, doesn't it? It was vile, but this has become the norm for that area, said Upper West Side resident Mike G. It was Sunday night, not much foot traffic. There were probably one or two others that walked by. I usually don't take pictures of others' misfortunes, but this was a level of degeneracy I haven't seen out in the open in the neighborhood yet. Well, I would suggest, Mike G., you ain't seen nothing yet. A representative of the group told the Daily Mail 9 p.m. on a Sunday evening, summer evening on the UWS, hardly imaginable a few months ago. Usually people are enjoying an ice cream cone after an evening at the playground. Now open prostitution. The change in the neighborhood since the use of hotels as shelters is undeniable, the person added. Yes, the buried lead. The change in the neighborhood since the use of hotels as shelters is undeniable. Well, as you may have heard me say on previous live streams back when I was in Crazy Town, aka Victoria, downtown Victoria had been somewhat dodgy for several years, but since COVID-19 and the placing of hundreds or thousands of people in shelters, formerly hotels, you don't want to be there. You simply do not want to be there. American tourists, if you are going to come to Victoria, do not go south of Yates Street and just stick to the tourist district. You probably want to avoid east of Douglas Street entirely. Probably want to avoid it entirely. Homelessness in New York City has been escalating since March and has been made worse by residents fleeing and the New York PD budget cuts, which dissolved its homeless outreach unit. Early last month, it was revealed that Mayor Bill de Blasio had quietly moved about 13,000 homeless people from shelters into luxury hotels in the area in a bid to avoid a virus outbreak, subsequently bringing crime and lawlessness to the neighborhood. Residents of the typically wealthy district have since complained that the program has led to an increase in crime, random violence, drug use, public urination, and open prostitution. Some locals even claim sex offenders have also moved into the streets. Well, so I guess New York is in competition with San Francisco as to which city can be America's most depraved. But, New York City ran into a similar problem in the 1970s, and the rich people started to leave. And if the rich people leave New York City has little reason to exist, at least certainly in its present form. At the same time, encampments have also popped up on the sidewalks, and the city's homeless outreach resources have been too overwhelmed to dismantle them. A crime report released by the NYPD on Wednesday also showed gun violence in the city increased by a staggering 166% across all boroughs except Staten Island last month. Yes, and I'll have more to say about that in a minute. Some of the city's finest restaurants are also considering shutting down for good as they struggle to cope with a slump in customers. Yes, people going to restaurants, bad. People urinating on the street. That is Bill de Blasio's New York City. Restaurants and bars have been able to resume business by offering outdoor seating to diners. However, owners have complained the move has not been enough to keep them afloat. I'm also told that if you order a drink when you're sitting on the patio in New York City, that they will not bring the drink to you until you have got the meal that you have ordered. And they say, no, that's the law. Renowned French chef Daniel Boulud, the owner of Michelin-starred restaurant Daniel in the Upper East Side, told the Wall Street Journal some businesses won't survive if city continues to delay reopening indoor operations. Governor Andrew Cuomo had told residents at the start of the summer that indoor dining, which was initially expected to resume on July 6, will be postponed until officials decide it was safe, but he has yet to announce a new date. Yes, killing your city to own Trump. That's what Bill de Blasio and Andrew Cuomo are doing. When their revenue base disappears, I suppose it will be not so amusing for them. And once again, there's a tendency to laugh at the situations in New York City and New York State as a whole. But those Americans listening here who are not living in New York City or New York State should be reminded that the people who are fleeing are bringing their shit-lib attitudes with them, and they are looking to destroy where they are moving, which might be where you live. Once again, people fleeing New York State have largely destroyed Vermont, and people fleeing Massachusetts have largely destroyed New Hampshire. People fleeing California have done very bad things to both Colorado and Texas, and there is no end in sight. They don't seem to have learned anything by the experience of living in a city which has turned into a shithole. They are, to put it in theological terms, invincibly ignorant. A story from the mysteriously named DNYUZ. A violent August in New York City, shootings double and murder is up by 50%. The data released on Wednesday reflected a trend many cities across the country are experiencing in a year already marked by pandemic and civil unrest. A new surge in shootings, murders, and other crimes that has public officials grasping for explanations and scrambling to respond. Grasping for explanations. Well, the explanation is right in front of their face. Oh, yeah, we're not going to hold people in jail subject to bond restrictions because that would be racist. Black people committing crimes, don't arrest them because that would be racist, and you might get riots. And the policemen doing this will have their lives ruined. Let's cut the number of police officers actually on the street because the police force is systemically racist. And further back than that, it would be unfair to be mean to people urinating, defecating, shooting up on the street, and perhaps even be mean to them if they're shouting gibberish and obscenities in your face or attempting to attack you. They've lived hard lives, and you have to put aside your privilege and think of that. The uptick has been seized upon by President Trump, who has tried to shift the public's attention away from his response to the pandemic to what he depicts is out of control crime in New York City. Okay, so the very basis of this story is crime is out of control in New York City, but bad President Trump, Orange Bad Man, is trying to shift the public's attention away from his response to the pandemic to what he depicts is out of control crime in New York City and other urban areas. He has tried to blame the rise in violence on local Democratic leaders. Well, they're the ones who set the rules, aren't they? Violent crime always rises in the summer, but this year has been extreme. In New York since May, the city has recorded 791 shootings, a more than 140% increase over the same period in 2019. The 180 murders seen between May and August is more than a 51% increase compared with 2019. In August alone, there were 242 shootings in the city compared to 91 last year. The number of murders rose from 36 to 53. This year's numbers are still far lower than the high levels of crime seen in the 1980s and 90s, and the rise in shootings and murders come after years in which the city saw violent crime drop to record low levels not seen since the 1950s. Why would that be? Because of stop and frisk, which has ended now. Drops in reports of rape and grand larceny have helped keep the overall crime rate this year mostly flat. That rate includes tallies for 7 major crimes: murder, rape, robbery, assault, burglary, grand larceny, and car theft. Well, I would suspect that the reason for this is that a great many people living in New York City and elsewhere have simply decided not to report these crimes to the police because they know that nothing is going to be done. There's the further risk that if these crimes were committed or alleged to be committed by a black man or black men, and if word gets out that they have complained to the police, they will be condemned as Karens, or whatever the male equivalent of a Karen is, and the world will fall in on their heads. The toll from shootings has been heavy. In August, the people who died from gun violence included the caretaker of a church in Brooklyn, who was shot inside the church, a mother shot in the back of the head in front of a school in the Bronx, and a man struck by a stray bullet in Brooklyn while he was playing handball. Asked on Wednesday about the spike in shootings, Mayor Bill de Blasio said the city was dealing with a perfect storm. My word, I'm sick of that cliche. And suggested that the pandemic was in part to blame. Yes, it's people being afraid to leave their houses, which has led to an explosion in crime in New York City. But he said that the hardship was temporary because a coronavirus vaccine would be developed. They are investing so much in this vaccine, even as Fauci and others say, 50, 60% effective. We know with the entire society on hold for months, all sorts of things got set in motion that were truly unusual. For instance, blind panic leading to the closure of businesses and people being imprisoned inside their homes and being told that social life, well, it's over now. It's too dangerous to have social life in New York City and other places. If you want to have a social life, you are a murderer. Yeah. So you wouldn't expect that to lead to an increase of violence. Also, what we know to be a vast increase in use in marijuana. I don't know what the status of marijuana is in New York City, but let's say other illegal drugs as well, and a vast increase in the consumption of alcohol, all which point towards increase in crime. I was talking about this with someone today, and here's a curious thing. Now, I suppose if people are feeling anxious about the state of the world, feeling anxious about COVID-19, we know that people are drinking a lot more, which works. It works for the time that you're drunk. When you wake up the next day with a hangover, you are typically feeling anxious and paranoid, which does not help. I suppose you could treat that with more alcohol, but that can only go so long before your liver packs it in. Yeah, marijuana induces paranoia. This is well known. Now, we've decided that we don't want people going outside. We don't want people getting exercise. So people are getting fatter. And of course, both alcohol use and marijuana use makes people fatter. And they're getting less exercise, which means that the lockdown is creating amongst millions of people medical conditions such that if they ever got COVID-19, they would have one of these famous comorbidities, which would make it more likely that COVID-19 would actually be a serious condition for them, and indeed perhaps leading to death. John Pfaff, a law professor at Fordham University, has been scrutinizing crime statistics, said that crime in the city had reached historically low levels, making the current rise seem large in percentage terms. The percent change numbers look shocking because we're doing so well, not necessarily because we're doing so poorly. That's quite a bait and switch, wouldn't you say? Oh, yeah, if you want to look at the 70s and 80s, things were really worse. Well, 1980 was 40 years ago, so there's two generations since then. It's a rather ridiculous comparison. New York City had demonstrated that it was possible of reducing crime, but now, no, we can't do that anymore for all sorts of reasons. Oh, the New York Times is reporting this as well. Troubling surge in homicides. People have gotten to the point where they just don't give a damn, said a minister in Kansas City, which is on pace for a record number of killings. So we know that it's official because the New York Times has noticed it. Due to a decrease in grand larcenies and rapes last month, well, one of the reasons for a decrease in grand larcenies would be American burglars typically are shy of what they call hot burglaries. Hot burglaries are those in which the occupant is at home because these people don't want to be shot to death. So more people staying at home should mean fewer burglaries. What else is part of the new normal? Black, black, blackety, black, black, black. And apparently we're not paying enough attention to Black people. It's terribly, terribly sad. No less than Michelle Obama is telling us so. And this is a sad, sad story. One of the most famous women in the world, not just Black women, but one of the most famous women in the world. And she has a new hairstyle. She's got kind of a perm. It does not look good. But in any event, according to the New York Post, former First Lady Michelle Obama said on her podcast Thursday that white America acts like Black women, including herself, don't exist. Does she really believe this? Or is it one of those situations where, again, Schrodinger's cat, she believes it, but she doesn't believe it? Once again, it is hard to get away from Michelle Obama if you pay attention to the world. But not enough people coming up to her, asking to touch her hair lately. Are there not enough white women and white men asking to touch Black women's hair? Because we know, because the media has told us so, and enough Black people have told us so, that white people are supposedly absolutely entranced, obsessed, mesmerized, one might say, by Black women's hair. And they just can't stop touching it. Poor Michelle Obama continues. When I've been completely incognito during the 8 years in the White House, walking the dogs on the canal, people will come up and pet my dogs, but will not look me in the eye. They don't know it's me. Maybe it's her body language. She looks like a threatening, unfriendly person in still photographs. I've never had the pleasure of meeting the woman in person, but what white folks don't understand It's like that is so telling of how white America views people who are not like them. You know, we don't exist. And when we do exist, we exist as a threat. And that's exhausting. Again, with the exhausting. One of the attributes of the exhaustion is that people don't talk a lot. They don't get up too much in the way of activities. They're just content to, veg out on the couch and watch Netflix or Amazon Prime. Not to be a perennial nuisance as Michelle Obama is, but all these people on the left, they're exhausted. They're just so exhausted. No, they're not. They're lying. What the white community doesn't understand about being a person of color, don't you mean black person of color, that is superannuated and borderline racist. About being a person of color in this nation is that there are daily sites in our workplaces where people talk over you or people don't even see you. Yes, and once again, that is because black women are famously known to be wallflowers, shy and retiring types who would never, ever raise their voices, especially in front of white women, because we all know that black women are terrified of white women. Black women do not want to make a scene ever, and they never do, despite rumors to the contrary. Michelle Obama then shared a story of her going with her friend Pemberton Hurd. Who would this be? Oh, Danielle Pemberton Hurd. And her daughters, Sasha and Malia, to grab some ice cream after a soccer game during her time in the White House. We were stopping to get ice cream, and I had told the Secret Service to stand back because we were trying to be normal, trying to go in. When I'm just a black woman, I notice that white people don't even see me. I'm standing there with two little black girls, another black female adult. They're in soccer uniforms, and a white woman cuts right in front of us to order, like she didn't even see us. Yes, this is one of these microaggressions. It happens millions of times. It's almost certainly made up. The girl behind the counter almost took her order, and I had to stand up because I know Pemberton Hurd was like, well, I'm not going to cause a scene with Michelle Obama. Once again, black women never cause scenes. So I stepped up and I said, excuse me, you don't see four people standing right here? You just jumped in line? Did she ask to speak to the manager? Obama said the woman didn't apologize. She never looked me in my eye. She didn't know it was me. Because Michelle Obama is practically an anonymous person. She's like one of those identikit figures. No one knows what Michelle Obama looks like. This is what she expects us to believe. All she saw was a black person or a group of black people, or maybe she didn't even see that because we were that invisible. Oh, so I guess this is one of the effects of the magic, the voodoo that we call white supremacy, that white people have the ability to turn black people invisible. Ooh, pretty scary stuff, I must say. And what one must applaud Michelle Obama for her courage, for her rare courage, and her rare ability as a black woman to speak up and say what is bothering her, because that is so most unusual. Another unhappy black person who is a celebrity is John Boyega, who is an English actor. Yes, he is an English actor, born in Peckham in London. And he is on the cover of GQ, a former Gentleman's Quarterly, which is black, blackity, black, this month. And Black Lives Matter has just changed everything. I shouldn't think there are very many black people who buy Gentleman's Quarterly, but never mind. John Boyega has slammed Disney for sidelining his Star Wars character and giving all the nuance to his white co-stars Adam Driver and Daisy Ridley. The actor, 28, portrayed the franchise's first black stormtrooper. Yeah, smashing those glass ceilings in The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker, and told how he thinks Disney marketed his character as being much more important than he actually was. Speaking to British GQ, he said, "You get yourself involved in projects and you're not necessarily going to like everything. But what I would say to Disney is do not bring out a black character, market them to be much more important in the franchise than they are, and then have them pushed to the side. It's not good. I'll say it straight up. So what you're saying is that Disney gave you more attention than your role deserved, and then continued to have you as a relatively minor character. Oh, okay. I can understand how that might enrage someone. Discussing his experience of being a black cast member in the films, the actor suggested his white co-stars, Driver and Ridley, were given more complex characters in comparison to himself or Kelly Marie Tran, who is of Vietnamese descent. Well, there was this romance going on between his character and Rose Tico, I believe, and it was a dud. Because neither of them can act, and worse than that, neither of them have any charisma. Let's see, Daisy Ridley has the eyebrows. Adam Driver can certainly act and is a forceful figure. But this was the complaint about the last three films, was that they were full of Mary Sues. And he found himself in the unfortunate situation of being a Mary Sue. Look, he's a black man. He can be just as good a stormtrooper as a white man. Let's see, Finn's screen time diminished in sequel The Last Jedi and Denouement, The Rise of Skywalker. He said, like you guys knew what to do with Daisy Ridley, you knew what to do with Adam Driver. That's because they were lead characters and you were not. You already said that your character wasn't that important. You know what to do with these other people. When it came to Kelly Marie Tran, when it came to John Boyega, fuck all. So what do you want me to say? What they want me to say is I enjoyed being a part of it. It was a great experience. Nah. I'll take that deal when it's a great experience. And he talks about nuance again. Oh, Adam knows this. Daisy knows this. Everyone knows I'm not exposing anything. He said, I'm the only cast member who had their own unique experience of that franchise based on their race. Let's just leave it at that. It makes you angry with a process like that. It makes you much more militant. It changes you. Before you realize I got given this opportunity, but I'm in an industry that wasn't even ready for me. Nobody else in the cast had people saying they were going to boycott the movie because they were in it. Nobody else had the uproar and death threats sent to their Instagram DMs and social media saying black this and black that, and you shouldn't be a stormtrooper. Well, the story was put out by Disney that Kelly Marie Tran was bullied off social media because apparently America or the world was not ready for a person of Vietnamese descent in the Star Wars saga. I don't really think anyone had a problem with that. She's this pudgy woman, plain, who can't act and has no charisma. That was the problem, but I want to see what happens to John Boyega's career after this, because Disney, that's the game in movies now, in theater movies at any rate. They have a quasi-monopoly. Movie studios really do not like it when you attack them in public. And when you pretty much accuse them of racism, they really don't like that at all. Oh, well, all black actors have to. No, there's plenty of black actors out there. I suspect that this Boyega fellow is going to be blacklisted, no pun intended. Oh, here's more. I feel like, especially as celebrities, we have to talk through this filter of professionalism and emotional intelligence. Sometimes you just need to be mad. You need to lay down what it is that's on your mind. Sometimes you don't have enough time to play the game. John became emotional during his speech, which he said came from looking into the crowd and seeing his own fear mirrored back at him from the other black men present. Yes, because black men are terrified of white people. We all know this to be true. That just made me cry because you don't get to see that. Chris Hayner, an editor at gaming website GameSpot, because that's where I go for my movie reviews, said John Boyega's entire story was forgotten. Kelly Marie Tran was turned into a glorified extra. I mean, it's pretty easy to say. The reason that there was such a reaction, negative reaction against the most recent Star Wars movies is Disney and the head of Disney a tiresome woman producer whose name escapes me. The future is female. Look, we have a Skywalker who's not a Skywalker. We have a Jedi who's not a Jedi, who just intuits all this stuff, doesn't need to be trained because she is a strong woman. And oh, look, there's a black person. Oh, look, there's a Vietnamese people. And let's hint around homosexual relationships here. Let's just try to insinuate pause everywhere and expect to be applauded for it. I mean, if you've seen clips from this movie, like this one scene where all of these stormtroopers try to attack Daisy Ridley, and they do it one at a time because, of course, that's what you would do. The recent movies were just relentlessly stupid. But, oh, Finn had so much potential and was my favorite FA character, someone tweeted. I'm glad you've spoken up. Black and POC characters deserve better. John Boyega is one of the bravest people I have ever seen. No, I just think he's not all that bright, actually. This is more to the point. While John Boyega is correct in getting the short end of the stick in Star Wars, it's overstating a bit to claim any character in those movies had nuance. And again, LOL, what Daisy Ridley's character had no nuance. I think it's just poor writing rather than racism, to be honest. It was an awful, awful trilogy because it was simply token gestures. Having a diverse cast does not make a movie better, and that's what Disney thought it would do. Kathleen Kennedy. Yes, that is the woman's name. Someone calling himself or herself Fox Mulder said John Boyega had the second most time on screen in all three movies, behind only Ridley. Driver had much less time than both of them and almost no words in the last movie. Poe became more important than Finn because Boyega is not a good actor and Finn was a weak character. The end. Oh dear. You know, I suspect it's one of those situations that when Adam Driver wasn't on the screen, the audience was saying, where is Adam Driver? Bring back Adam Driver. No one was saying that about John Boyega. But yes, we must feel pity for him in this terrible time in his life when he's being put on the cover of British GQ because he's such a celebrity. Is he? He's so great because he's angry? That's pretty unusual. According to Gallup, U.S. perceptions of white-black relations sink to new low, which I guess is part of the new normal. Americans' already tepid review of relations between white and black Americans has soured since 2018 and is now the most negative of any year in Gallup's trend since 2001. The majority of U.S. adults say relations between white and black Americans are very, 24%, or somewhat, 31%, bad, while less than half call them very, 7%, or somewhat, 37%, good. Most Americans were upbeat about white-black relations between 2001 through 2013. I wonder what happened then. The sharp decline in positive perceptions followed numerous high-profile incidents in the prior year of unarmed black citizens being killed by white police officers. Well, that's one way to put it. Might have had something to do with those 5 cops being shot to death by a BLM supporter in Dallas. It may have had something to do with Americans being gaslighted about Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown, and the list goes on and on and on. Through most of Gallup's trend, white Americans have been more likely than black Americans to rate white-black relations positively. But until 2012, large majorities of both groups thought relations were generally good. Since then, positive ratings from white and black Americans have been more subdued. 46%. I think it's very or somewhat good. That's white people. 36% of black people think it is good or somewhat good. The survey also asked Americans to rate relations between other racial and ethnic groups. Of the 5 different pairings explored, white-black relations were viewed as the most troubled. Let's see. Whites and Asians, 78% good. Blacks and Asians, 68% good. I wonder where that's coming from. Blacks and Hispanics, 66% good, also rather dubious. Whites and Hispanics, 62% good. Whites and blacks, 44%. Americans remain optimistic that white-black relations will improve. Well, you just have to turn on the TV or turn on YouTube. plenty to be optimistic about there. Oh, and in further Bella Thorne news, I'll get to the chat in just a minute. Bella Thorne's sister, Kaylee, there's about 73 different ways to spell Kaylee, but this one is spelled Kaili. Very arty. She has joined OnlyFans after it's revealed Bella raked in $2 million in 2 days and sparks outrage among fellow users by claiming sex work is not real. Uh-oh. Oh, that's very... She's only charging $9.99 per month, as opposed to her sister Bella, who charged $200 for one photograph, which was promised to be entirely nude and wasn't, causing a backlash, which bids fair to wreck OnlyFans. Sex workers, and we all love sex workers, they're the bestest workers in the whole world, slammed the former Disney star for profiting so heavily off the site while doing little to help destigmatize the sex work. I'm looking at a picture of Kaylee. I would have to say she's a better looking woman than her sister, and her breasts are real. But that's the way it goes, and now she's decided to just humiliate herself for cash, $9.99 a month. How long before every woman in America has an OnlyFans account? We seem to be headed in that direction. Okay, so let's look at the chat. Okay, people, sounds like the HBO show The Deuce. Okay, which I have not seen. That's from MCT. Claire Caw, are those pretty flowers real? No, they are not. They are permanent, artificial arrangements. Fresh flowers are quite expensive, and they have to be replaced on a regular basis. Also, it helps if you have some talent in arranging them, which I do not. Chogokin666 says they are sentient. Yes, they're getting tired of all the insults, these flowers. If you're going, okay. Jay Walker makes an amusing but perhaps a homophobic joke about San Francisco. I don't care, personally. Professor Pohl says hi. Hello, Professor Pohl. Oh, okay. Let's see. Okay, now we're talking about the Koran, but I'm not talking about the Koran. Heck McNeck says, New York is utterly bankrupt of common sense. Against stupidity, the gods themselves contend in vain. What's the old saying? What were once vices are now habits. Bob Paxson says, I pray for Glib Medley's safe delivery. Emmett Kelly-Zur says, once the rich flee, de Blasio can then bring the Sandinista People's Democratic Republic to New York City. Well, I'm sure AOC would be down with that. David Wright says, maybe in the future we can gentrify California. What happens if people start fleeing San Francisco in large numbers? I suppose there would be the idiots who would say, oh, the $6,000 the tiny $6,000 apartment is only $4,800 a month now. I got to rush. I'm sure all that talk about people urinating, defecating, shooting up on the street is terribly exaggerated. I'm sure there aren't that many lunatics going around screaming obscenities and threatening people. Okay. Let's see what else we got here. Minerva Shrine says there was also, as KMG said, a class aspect, inverted snobbery of a sort, allowing the worst of the working class to do as they please. Were these people referred to as working class? I mean, they haven't worked for years. Many of them have never worked. Chogokin666 was thinking what I was thinking. Working class, you must mean the lumpen entitled college people. Justin Poto says, my friends came back to New York City from vacation in North Carolina. They said the COVID checkpoint at the George Washington Bridge was a sign saying, quarantine yourself. Ha! Heck McNeck says, my hangovers are enjoyable. Bob Paxson, how does KMG know these things? Well, I've never smoked marijuana, but I know a lot of people who have or do. The feelings of paranoia are well documented, not least in Alex Berenson's book on the subject, Tell Your Children, which I have highly recommended before. And I will do so right now. Jay Walker, in New York, if you have marijuana, the police arrest you because it's not a hard enough drug. You must be on crack. Mike F., Antifa killer in Portland, part of team, probably got far away and won't be caught. This makes me depressed, says Pete Ferguson. I want to hide in my room and put on New Order. Are they depressing enough, though? Shouldn't you be listening to Joy Division instead? Man, that second record. Closer? I don't know. I wouldn't recommend that for people who are already in a state. Jay Walker, is there an animal that actually eats itself from the inside? Well, it's the Ouroboros, which eats itself from the outside perpetually. Chogakin 666, I have physical manifestations of the stress from the current gestalt. Black Paxton, but just the opposite happens in real life. Black men and women love the hair of everybody else. This is well observed. And it's projection. It's the opposite of the truth. But, you know, I'm sure perhaps a majority of Americans actually believe that white people can't get enough of black people's hair. That, well, I've never done it. I've never touched a black person's hair, and I don't know anyone who's ever done it, but I'm sure it goes on. Brandon Smith says, wandering around the city as a perfectly sane person while imitating the best examples of speaking gibberish and hollering obscenities can actually be a really fun way to take in the local drug adult culture. There was an episode of 30 Rock about that, where Liz Lemon got so fed up about how uncivilized New York had become that she used a prop wig and a prop dress, and she sort of made herself out to be like 65 years old and foul-mouthed and crazy. And I think she may have like poured things which stink over her, and she found out that everyone left her alone. They were all terrified of her. Suddenly she didn't have to worry about finding a seat in the subway, that sort of thing. There was also we saw Alec Baldwin's transformation into Batman in that same episode, with, of course, Liz Lemon playing the Joker part. Jay Walker says, Michelle Obama visited a local school in Islington. Guess what? 97% Muslim and African. Islington being a district of London. Claire Koss says, the Queen looks so petite and frail, and Mrs. O so large, dark, and menacing. Glib Medley says about Come and See, which I'm going to be speaking about tomorrow. I didn't see it. Thought I might do a Criterion free trial and watch it tomorrow. Is it good? It's very good. It is very harrowing. It's exceedingly harrowing. I don't know. It may be the most harrowing war movie ever made. It is. People have spoken of its realism, but many parts of the movie are exceedingly surrealistic. It's seen from the eyes of a boy who's 14 years old, who joins the partisans in White Russia fighting against the Germans. And I mean, the suggestion is that his mind is cracking or cracked under the weight of all the horrors that he's seen. There's one scene where we have this truck, this German army truck, and sitting in the driver's seat is a very attractive young woman in an officer's uniform, which no. And then later we see her eating lobster. Well, where would the lobster come from? So, as I say, there's a high degree of surrealism in the film, apart from, in addition to the shocking naturalism. Okay. Mary Crow says, I wonder if Michelle sees black people in her neighborhood. Well, she hasn't moved to a black neighborhood, has she? And of course, I kind of dropped the plot when I was talking about those 52 McDonald's franchisees, one for every week of the year, who are suing McDonald's, that the headline is obviously Black entrepreneurs refuse to work in Black neighborhoods. Sue parent company. Do you suppose the neighbors in Martha's Vineyard see her, says MCT? Yes. Yes, they can't avoid her. They just can't. Katie Halper. I've heard that name from somewhere. I don't know who that is. Perhaps I've forgotten. William Hicks says, I always felt that R2-D2 was upstaged by CPO or C3PO. And look how they screwed Chewbacca. Poor guy. He got called a walking carpet. That's the equivalent of an N-word for a Wookiee. You ever seen the Star Wars holiday special? All the Wookiee business in there. Minute after minute after minute of them speaking at length without any subtitles in the original. It's one of these things that you're told that you must see because it's so outrageous that you can hardly believe it. And I'm sure listeners have heard this so often as, yeah. No, this lives up to the hype. This lives up to the hype. Art Carney, who people will remember from The Honeymooners and many other things, he is actually enjoying virtual sex in a special chair with a video display as the Black singer Diane Carroll in a skin-tight outfit writhes, undulates, and such like. What? Yes, the funeral parlor. That's what I'm broadcasting from. It's pretty bright for a funeral parlor. I've actually never been into a funeral parlor, but I've been told that in real life they are quite subdued. Lighting. Do not watch that film, says Heck McNeck. I gather he was traumatized by it. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. I genuinely so. Okay, so there is an essay here from Paul Craig Roberts on Lou Rockwell's site. Does Western civilization have a future, or is it already in its grave? He begins, Sandia National Laboratories, a U.S. government-funded nuclear weapons developer, requires its white employees to be subjected to indoctrination in training sessions in which critical race theory propagandists tell the white employees they are racist because they have white privilege due to their skin color. One of the abused white employees, Casey Peterson, produced a video that rejected the propaganda of systemic white racism and white privilege. Scandia's white executives locked Peterson out of Sandia's email network so he could not receive support from his 16,000 fellow workers who have had enough of self-hating white bosses bad-mouthing white employees. The anti-race bosses at Scandia have been identified as James Peary, Director, Dory Ellis, Associate Director, David White, Head of the Cyber R&D Center, and Mark Sellers, Associate Director for the Mission Assurance Division. These self-hating whites have made it clear they want to force critical race theory, race-segregated trainings, and white male re-education camps on their employees. All dissent will be severely punished. Those who accept the re-education will be the ones promoted. Those who reject their brainwashing will be purged. This is happening during the Trump administration. Does this mean that Trump approves of the use of taxpayers' dollars to force-feed white employees of government-funded companies that they are racist? No. As a person who spent a quarter century in Washington, including as an assistant secretary of the U.S. Treasury, I can tell you that presidents know only a small percentage of the decisions government makes during their term of office. Most of the people in government are serving themselves, not the president, not the public, and they serve themselves by serving private interest groups. They become lobbyists inside government for private interests. This basic fact makes mincemeat of the liberal hope of a do-good government. The question that needs an answer is, why are the white executives who run Sandia destroying the confidence of white employees in the white race? If Congress really represented the Canadian people, there would be an investigation. The corrupt Sandia executives who are using taxpayers' money to teach their white employees to hate themselves for their racist sins have put Peterson on administrative leave Well, they try to concoct a case that his, quote, actions have comprised or posed a threat to Sandia computing and security systems, unquote. Of course, the corrupt anti-white racist executives will find out that Peterson comprised a threat to the security systems by objecting to anti-white propaganda. What is going on at Sandia is ongoing at every level of government, state, local, and federal. It is also going on at private companies, both public and private. For example, I know a software engineer employed by a private company who had to go to a sensitivity training session where white male employees had to stand up and be identified as oppressors of the female and non-white employees. Because of the far-reaching popularity of my columns, I received numerous emails from white male employees describing how much they hate their bosses because of the hostility of their female and black bosses toward white males. They pray for an Asian boss, Chinese, Japanese, Korean. I noticed that Indian is not in that list because they judge them by performance, not by an anti-white male ideology. White bosses are unreliable because they got to be bosses by being self-hating white males. In her book, The Blackening of Europe, which will be coming up on the book club, Claire Ellis describes the ideas that over the decades deracinated the white European ethnicities of confidence in their race, culture, and achievements. This confidence-destroying deracination has enabled the ongoing, largely unopposed riots and looting in numerous American cities. The white liberals who govern these cities lack the confidence to maintain law and order. They have been convinced that law and order is a white privilege. Whether or not Trump wins re-election, Western civilization may be in its grave. But if Trump loses re-election fairly, it will be definite proof that the structure of belief that upholds Western civilization has completely collapsed, and white people themselves will have voted their own demise. I think that's a little unfair for the reason that most white people know what the media tells them, and the media tells them lies constantly. And most white people to this day believe that no, CNN and MSNBC wouldn't be constantly lying to us. Peaceful protests, peaceful protests, peaceful protests. I mean, they may be beginning to come out of their stupor, but these stations, they're authority figures in the same way that the Academy is full of authority figures, that big business is full of authority figures. Or when Barack Obama talks about living in Honolulu, where his education was being paid for by his white grandmother. In fact, the household was run by this white grandmother, and apparently she'd had an unfortunate experience with a black man attempting to assault her, and later she was afraid of black men in public, and Barack Obama called out this dead woman who had done so much for him. He in the parlance of our times, threw her under the bus because obviously, an elderly white woman who had, been threatened with physical violence by a black man would, not take that to heart because why? Why should she? I mean, it's outrageous that she jumped to some sort of stereotype. Well, you wouldn't need to be, attacked on a Honolulu street to jump to a stereotype. You could look at FBI statistics, So, who do we hate now in America? Who is due for canceling? I guess that would be Adam Carolla. I don't think he's going to be canceled because he doesn't care what the cancelers think of him. Yesterday, he made a bunch of tweets about COVID-19, accusing people of being fraidy cats about the whole thing. And so what you're saying is those lives aren't valuable and don't matter. You're a real class act. And Adam Carolla responded today, so what you're saying is freedom isn't valuable and doesn't matter. Someone responded to him, sociopathic tweet. There's a lot we don't know about the virus, including any long-term effects. So you don't know they're only old, sick, or both. And even if you're right, do sick or old people deserve their lives less? If young and healthy spread it, how do you deal with that? Carolla responded, we needed more guys like you during World War II. Let's see. John Rosenberg tweeted to him, is he blocked me? Yes, apparently he has. Imagine writing off whole categories of people as disposable. Then imagine they use disinformation to try and convince other people. Let's maybe try empathy or turning off Fox News. John Rosenberg makes comic books. Of course he does. Of course he does. Carolla responded, say hi to your pals under the bed. Carolla said, if we all wear masks, we can get back to normal that much sooner. Even if you're alone on the beach, you must wear a mask to send a message. So you're good with the old and the weak being wiped out? He responded, I love the elderly. No child should ever have to bury a parent. And he has some fun at the expense of Nancy Pelosi, and we'll get to that a little later. Yes, teachers are heroes. Children are our future. We should act like these things are true. There's another thing that he tweeted. Look easy it was to get people to give up all their freedoms. Beck Barn tweeted, he responded, that's a good point. The scarier point is how easy it is for the media to get weak cowards to turn on the non-pussies. Today, I learned from CNN not paying attention to the CDC report about 94% of COVID deaths having pre-existing conditions. Guess that's what started it. Turns out the people dying from COVID are old or sick or both. How many of you pussies got played? And who's going to get played the next time? Don't New Yorkers, residents of New York City, consider themselves to be a particularly tough breed? I guess they're not all that tough then. If they can be browbeaten by the likes of Bill de Blasio and Andrew the Love Gov dishing it 24/7 Cuomo. And sanity has returned to the Trump White House with regard to COVID-19. This is excellent, excellent news from the New York Times. Dr. Scott Atlas has argued that the science of mask wearing is uncertain. True. That children cannot pass on the coronavirus, largely true, and that the role of the government is not to stamp out the virus. Finally, someone said it, but to protect its most vulnerable citizens as COVID-19 takes its course. As Alex Berenson likes to say, virus going virus. Ideas like these, both ideologically freighted and scientifically disputed, have propelled the radiologist and senior fellow at Stanford University's conservative Hoover Institution into President Trump's White House, where he is pushing to reshape the administration's response to the pandemic. Trump has embraced Dr. Atlas, as has Mark Meadows, the White House chief of staff, even as he upsets the balance of power within the White House coronavirus task force with ideas that top government doctors and scientists like Anthony Fauci, Deborah Birx, and Jerome Adams, the Surgeon General, find misguided, even dangerous, according to people familiar with the task force's deliberations. That might be the point. I think Trump clearly does not like the advice he was receiving from the people who are the experts, Fauci, Birx, etc. So he slowly shifted from their advice to somebody who tells him what he wants to hear. And of course, politicians never seek advice from people who tell them what they want to hear. There's no evidence that lockdowns were effective in restraining the spread of COVID-19 because you can't keep people locked up forever, not unless they die. And that's what they tried in New York. That's what they did. That's what the Love Gov did in New York State. And that's what the governor of New Jersey did. Who's in favor of killing people now? And herd immunity, that's what, flatten the curve. Remember, flatten the curve? No, we got to wait for the vaccine. We have to remain paralyzed until the vaccine arrives, and we have to wear masks everywhere, despite the fact that there's no evidence that they are efficacious. Atlas said in a radio interview yesterday, there's never been any advocacy of a herd immunity strategy coming from me to the president, to anyone in the administration, to the task force, to anyone I've spoken to. Because that's what we were told. Land of the Free, in the Land of the Free and Home of the Brave news from the curiously named DNYUZ, college students told to report COVID parties asked to snitch or not to snitch. I'm going to make a wild guess here. that students studying women's studies, intersectional studies, queer studies, etc., 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 they're going to snitch. They're going to snitch. However, they are not going to snitch on black parties because that would make them Karens. So it's all very intersectional. It looked to be a typical college party. A small group of students crammed in a kitchenette, cheering on as a shirtless guy arm wrestled a laughing young woman. No one wore masks. The scene was posted on Snapchat by one of the partygoers, a first-year student at Cornell, along with a selfie with a mocking caption. The people who slide up saying you're not social distancing are the ones that wouldn't have been invited anyway. Ooh, that is quite a burn. The response was swift and severe. Within days, an online petition was created demanding that the students' admission to Cornell be revoked. And in the week since, the petition has collected more than 3,500 signatures. Are these 3,500 signatures within Cornell or in the whole world? Because that's not very many signatures. Cornell University is attempting to take the biggest feat of allowing all students back on campus. So brave, so brave. This cannot be done without immense safety precautions taken and the compliance of every student. A group calling itself the Concerned Student Coalition wrote in the petition, "We need to hold these students accountable for their actions." And I'm reminded of that Sam Hyde bit when he was on, Comedy Central or whatever it's called, where it was explained the bullying, how it benefits children. I mean, how children today are not being bullied enough and how they're going to turn into weak, pathetic specimens as a result. Well, I would suggest that the members of the Concerned Student Coalition were simply not bullied enough when they were younger, or not being bullied enough today. "Nobody likes snitching. It's not comfortable," said Melissa Montejo, a sophomore at Cornell who signed the petition. You don't seriously mean that. You've heard of this counterculture? That apparently snitching is the highest ambition any young American can have. I'm really not one to go around and tell people what to do. I don't believe you, Melissa. But for me, this was troubling. 3 months of being careful and not engaging in problematic behavior is worth saving a life. Well, first of all, how do you know it's going to save a life? And how many lives are going to be lost otherwise because of a lockdown? Have any of these people considered that? No, they have not, because they don't know anything about probability, anything about risk. They know nothing about statistics, and they don't understand any numbers higher than 1,000. Jessica Zhang, the student who posted the party scene to Snapchat, said she had apologized and met with Cornell officials. Neither Ms. Zhang or Cornell would say whether she was disciplined. In recent weeks, the coronavirus outbreak has spread swiftly on college campuses. The New York Times has tracked thousands of cases that were linked to returning students. Several schools, including University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, Notre Dame, and the State University of New York College at Oneonta, suspended in-person classes after more than 100 students at each campus tested positive, often following large parties. If they don't get sick, what difference does it make? It's an extraordinary situation, and students face a quandary: report parties to campus officials or keep quiet and hope for the best. As one freshman said at Hunter College, which has a dorm open, even though classes are remote this semester, "I don't know if I'd want to narc on people I'm trying to become friends with." That's good thinking there. Before coming here, I remember thinking, yeah, I'll definitely report people if they're going to parties, said Kyle Duran, a freshman at Binghamton University, upstate New York. But after spending just a few days on campus, Duran had second thoughts. It's a lot harder to want to when you're living and going to class with society. Or as George Costanza once said, we're living in a society here. And it's good to know that there are still American college students who understand this. And of course, Bloomberg has been pushing the panic for months, and they are not about to give up, despite the facts. It took 3 people to write this story that appeared today, Olivia Raymond, David Baker, and Shruti Singh. The U.S. can't put COVID-19 behind it. New case counts are declining in some recent hotspots, but they're spiking in places in Iowa and South Dakota. And how many of these people are being hospitalized? How many of these people are being treated in any way? How many people are dying from it? Let's not get into that, huh? Signaling what may be a new phase, go second wave. In the country's virus fight, as progress in one state is repeatedly offset by infections in others with little improvement overall. If you cannot look at numbers of deaths being here and then going down to here and not understand that that is profound improvement overall, then you're too stupid to be writing for Bloomberg. It's going to be this kind of rolling fire with certain flare-ups that occur in different parts of the country at different times. That Amesh Adalja, are there any Americans still working in this sector? A senior scholar at Johns Hopkins University Center for Health Security. This is a virus that's established itself into the population. Yes, that's what viruses do. No, it's a lack of willpower. We're not waving our fist at the virus enough. We're not, letting the virus know that we mean business. And you had better back off, virus, or we're going to kick your ass. That is seriously the way that these politicians are carrying on. And it's shameful. Even for them, it's shameful that somehow viruses are sentient. We know that COVID-19 is notoriously racist. I mean, it's bad enough that it's vicious, but, then we find out it's racist as well. What are the advantages of wearing masks aside from, appearing virtuous before other people or idiotic to other people like me, especially if you're wearing them outdoors under the canopy of the sky? Okay, so masks make you anonymous, and they make it more difficult to breathe, and they induce anxiety. So numbers 2 and 3, I suppose they might have consequences. This story from the U.S. Sun. Shocking footage shows the moment a priest in a face mask drops dead in front of his congregation in Cameroon. The clip was shot as the man, identified as the Reverend Father Jude, was delivering a sermon in the western city of Douala on August 30th. The Reverend, who is also the spiritual director of the country's Catholic Men's Association, is seen standing at his pulpit and leading a Sunday Mass. At one point in the address, he pauses and then stops speaking altogether. His eyes then become droopy, and he sways on the spot for a moment before keeling backward and falling to the floor. Fellow clergymen who had been sat behind him rushed forward to help, and members of the congregation can be heard screaming. It is not currently clear whether the priest had any known health conditions. And let's see what Alex Berenson has to say. Lockdowns may be much deadlier than we realize. Why? PCR tests sharply overstate how many people have SARS-CoV-2. States use those tests to assign deaths from COVID. If many people are falsely positive, real COVID-related deaths must be lower than the reported figure. But the excess mortality this year is real. It's quite possibly the only real and reliable number we have. It is closely tracked. Reported COVID deaths, which is convenient. It makes us think, excess mortality must have risen and fallen with COVID. Not necessarily. Early on, many excess deaths occurred in nursing homes in New York, Massachusetts, etc. Those deaths were often assigned to COVID even without positive tests. But care was disrupted. Some people likely died because they weren't being fed, etc. Family members have reported this to me. The lack of feeding even happened in hospitals, or so family members have said. Remember, families were blocked from seeing patients and medical staff were terrified. Those are not COVID deaths, but they will forever be counted that way. Since April, nursing homes and hospitals are doing better, so the risks to the very frail have fallen. But routine medical care has been disrupted, including cardiovascular and cancer deaths. Overdoses have spiked too. At the same time, testing for COVID has exploded. We now know that testing is leading to some deaths that have nothing to do with COVID to be classified as COVID, but we have no idea how many. We have no idea how the real increase caused by lockdown deaths interacts with the artifactual increase in COVID classified deaths. It is possible that the number of lockdown deaths is in the tens of thousands, while the number of misclassified COVID deaths is quite small, in the thousands. That's what the reported figures say. Excess deaths are somewhat higher than COVID deaths, but not much. But, and I would not have said this before the New York Times piece on PCR testing, that the number of misclassified COVID deaths is now very substantial, while the number of lockdown or panic deaths is actually over 100,000. Let's call the nursing home deaths panic deaths. Further evidence is here in the age stratified death data, which shows that excess deaths in younger people have been remarkably consistent since March, even though the epidemic has waxed and waned. Excess death figures are the only reliable figures, in the same way that when it comes to crime, violent crime, murder is the only reliable statistic, for the reason is that murders are not ignored. They're simply not ignored. If someone is found dead, there will be an investigation. Lots of people are raped, robbed, burglarized, assaulted, etc., and these crimes are never reported to the police, or the police simply ignore them. That is not the case with murder, and with excess deaths, we have an actual number. As to how many deaths were caused by COVID-19 in 2020, we're never going to know the answer to that, because the media and the health authorities are going to claim that it's actually higher than the reported numbers. They've already started doing this. They have lost all sense of proportion. They have lost all sense of ethics, of decency and honor. They've dug a hole for themselves, and they don't know how to get out. I wouldn't be surprised if we're told, say next year, that this absurd figure from Professor Niels Ferguson at Imperial College London was actually true. Oh, there was 500,000 people died, maybe 1 million people died, maybe more, because the way that this praxis has been set up, someone who has known to have COVID, or a test comes back positive for COVID, these people die of cancer in 40 years' time. That will be recorded as a COVID-19 death. So Nancy Pelosi. These are difficult times for women in much of the Western world. I have resorted to cutting my own hair, and I think I've got a little better at it, but I'd never known a woman who cut her own hair. And in any event, women care far more about their hair than men do. So I suppose Nancy Pelosi was in a bit of a spot. This is according to San Francisco Chronicle. Pelosi declined to apologize Wednesday for her visit to a San Francisco hair salon that was supposed to be closed under the city's coronavirus pandemic rules, and suggested the business had tricked her. Tricked her. She is the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and she is obviously no match for the sharp-witted people, for the Mensa candidates who work in hair salons. It reminds me of Dr. Zoidberg on Futurama. Help, friends, a guinea pig tricked me. I was tricked by a hair salon. That really inspires confidence. Pelosi said she took responsibility for falling for the setup to have her hair done inside the salon Monday, but the San Francisco Democrats said that if anyone owes an apology, it's the salon. I think they owe me an apology for setting me up, she said in an event about school reopenings in San Francisco's Noe or No Valley. I don't know how it's pronounced. Pelosi's visit to the salon set off a firestorm when Fox News posted security footage of it Tuesday. Her visit happened one day before salons in the city were allowed to open for business, but only outdoors. And guess who's not wearing a mask in the salon? that would be Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. Pelosi indicated that E-Salon in the Marina District, where she had her hair done Monday, had given her an incorrect version of the rules, and she trusted them. Oh, foolish woman. And yes, okay. The Daily Mail. She demands for an apology from the salon after Trump mocked her. Well, you don't think you're going to be mocked about this? It's too funny. She keeps using this word set up. Again, if Nancy Pelosi was so very concerned about correct COVID-19 protocol, why was she not wearing a mask? Oh, I've just had my hair washed. I don't wear a mask when I'm washing my hair. Do you wear a mask when you're washing your hair? I always wear a mask, and that picture is when I just came out of the bowl. Well, if you have some woman leaning over your face as she is washing your hair, because that's how it works in hair salons, why shouldn't you be wearing a mask? Shouldn't both of you be wearing masks? Because that's pretty close contact. That's almost like lip to lip contact there. Donald Trump mocks crazy Nancy Pelosi over her visit to closed hair salon in defiance of COVID rules, saying turning her in on tape is a big deal, and claiming Republicans will flip the House and send Nancy packing. Well, one can only hope. She's pretty vigorous for 80 years old. I got to give her that. She looks like the Grim Reaper, but I suppose if I'm as vigorous as her, when I'm 80, I will look like the Grim Reaper as well. She doesn't look as frightening as Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but Ruth Bader Ginsburg is what, 87, 88, something like that. Donald Trump has a sense of humor. The people in the media do not have sense of humor, and they don't know what a joke is. I suspect that they are offended by jokes. Obernois said that the world is divided into two kinds of people, those who love jokes and those who hate jokes, and the media hate jokes. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who is the former press secretary for Donald Trump, has written a book about her experience, and she tells a joke that Trump had made. That apparently when the dictator of North Korea, and forgive me for looking up the name here because their names are so very similar, Kim Jong-un winked at her during the Singapore summit, and Trump, yes, we made direct eye contact, and Kim nodded and appeared to wink at me. I was stunned. I quickly looked down and continued taking notes. She says in her new book, Speaking for Myself. Following the meeting, Sanders detailed that she relayed the incident to Trump and his then Chief of Staff, John Kelly, as they were on their way to the airport. Kim Jong-un hit on you. He did. He effing hit on you, Trump said in response. Sir, please stop, Sanders said. She said Trump and Kelly both howled with laughter as the beast drove on. Well, Sarah, that settles it, Trump said, according to Sanders. You're going to North Korea and taking one for the team. Your husband and kids will miss you, but you'll be a hero to your country. Now, I see Trump was whoring out Huckabee Sanders. This is what is all over Twitter, and this is what responsible people in the media are saying, despite the fact that taking one for the team could mean all manner of things in this context. It could mean winking back at him or just smiling at him or some such. I don't know. I think it's pretty funny. And I think that most Americans would find it pretty funny too. Because the idea of actually coitus with Kim Jong-un, I mean, that's not a thing. And that's never happened, right? It's almost unthinkable. The thing about Trump on Twitter is that he learned that Hillary Clinton's campaign would spend hours. They'd have a dozen people spending hours determining the composition of a tweet. Trump just rattles this stuff off, and he's better than almost anyone in the world at it. And his Twitter account, he is communicating directly to the American people and let them know what he's doing and what he's thinking. Isn't this the transparency that we are all supposed to invite them to the Oval Office? They wouldn't come. If they went, they wouldn't agree to anything. You always talk about your ability to negotiate a deal. This is grossly just dishonest because the Democrats have made clear their belief that Trump is not the legitimate president, that he was not elected legitimately. He stole the election at the behest of Vladimir Putin, that he is a puppet of Putin, a traitor, et cetera, and they will not come to any deal with him. If Trump and his administration had done their jobs, American schools would be open. How? Again, there's that special drawer in his desk in the Oval Office that says COVID-19 won, and he waves it, and COVID-19 goes away. Or alternately, COVID-19 gets dragged into a back alley and gets the shit kicked out of it because that's what it deserves. And any president who isn't prepared to go toe-to-toe with the virus is not fit to be president. This is how children think, or adolescents. But of course, it's not just Joe Biden. It's all of the media. From the Mail, Joe Biden launches $45 million TV ad attacking Trump over looting and rioting as he tries to overpower the president's law and order message. Good luck with that. Good luck with that. And I have to look at all these pictures of Joe Biden. Here's something interesting about his campaign. I learned this yesterday. His team is not telling people where he's going to be or even where he's speaking. When he was speaking from Pittsburgh, no, he wasn't speaking in Pittsburgh. He was speaking somewhere near Pittsburgh. Oh, and questions? No, you're not going to get any questions. Nope. Because that's not what public appearances are for. You're going to talk to a bunch of people. You're going to read a teleprompter to a bunch of people at laptops. That's simple. This is what campaigning in the age of Biden, in the age of Alzheimer's. YT says Trump is definitely entertaining. It's kind of hard to not like. Chad Chasson finds amusing my use of the word quite. And this says the Beltway. Ricky Wu says never liked the Donald President Trump, not like the Donald either. That's the first time I've said this. When I first started talking about him in 2015, Pot did not like his persona, constant vulgarity, crassness, narcissism, born, and ridiculous show that have nothing to do with this. But that he runs for president, and I'm all object because he is saying things that no presidential candidate has said since, I don't know, my life in my life. That it was just assumed that any Republican nominee for president was going to be the representative of the Chamber of Commerce or the Chinese Communist Party. And Trump stood out against this. He's got people like Stephen Miller to write him speeches. He has to make a serious speech, and several of Trump's speeches have been outstanding. Okay, Tricky Woo says Kevin's a robot. What would lead you to that conclusion? William Hicks, there ain't no words for the beauty, the splendor, the wonder of my hair, show it as long as God can show it my hair by the Cowsills. That was outstanding rendition of a song, musical Hair. Curious about musicals then and now. Hamilton, musical, right? Everyone loves it. Do you know when hits were generated? Like AM hits were generated by the musical Hair? It was like a half dozen of them. How many hits, popular songs have been generated by Hamilton? None. because it's not necessary for hit Broadway shows to have catchy tunes anymore. Cowsil's a very, very talented band. Kind of a sad story that their father, who was a martinet, he found out that one or two of them were smoking dope or whatever, and the band broke up about that. After that, a bunch of them were involved in various musical projects for quite a few years. One of them was a member of the Go-Go's, and one of them was married to Peter Case. They got involved in the alternative scene. Metal Mike says people with breathing issues also are not required to wear a mask because people with breathing issues are immune to COVID. I've mentioned before, I have to wear a mask when I go to Walmart, where I do my shopping now, because it is literally 2 blocks away. And the alternative would mean, I don't know, a walk of miles or something. But I just, it's exceedingly uncomfortable, and I feel anxiety and something close to panic, and I'm just in such a hurry to get out of there. And when I finally pull the mask off, when I get into the elevator, you know that sensation when you've been under the water for some period of time? Your head finally rises up, and you just, that's what it's like for me. Bob Paxton says, Alyssa Milano, I think she cut her own hair. People who hate jokes are a joke. Brandon Smith says they're the type of people who laugh at Ricky Gervais jokes. I don't know, I'm sort of hot and cold on Ricky Gervais. I like The Office, the original Office. Extras, I don't know, I kind of liked it. Ricky Gervais is a pretty daring comedian. Normally he does this by, oh, here's some terrible thing that you're not supposed to say. For instance, in The Office, that Nelson Mandela was, in fact, a terrorist. I'm sticking more of Stephen Fry. The British journalist Julie Burchill, who's quite well known in that country, said that Stephen Fry is the stupid person's idea of a smart person. And I thought, Julie Burchill has, I think, almost redeemed herself for all the stupid things she's written over the last 4 decades, more than 4 decades, with that one comment. Do you know that Stephen Fry has been joking about and extolling pedophilia for decades? That he had a play at the Edinburgh Festival, which was revived a few years ago, about a professor or a master at an English public school who is trading grades for sexual favors from a 13-year-old boy, and they end up living together in Morocco. What kind of marriage? Adult man, 13-year-old boy. And Stephen Fry seems to think that pedophilia is a very amusing subject. He's not funny. He's just the opposite of funny. I'm going to say a bunch of recondite words, strung together in a strange way, and you're all supposed to burst into laughter because I'm Stephen Fry. I went to Cambridge University. He is terrible. Mask disinhibit and make one a more kinetic protester, says Halper. That is an interesting idea. Young Earth says, my comments keep disappearing from chat soon as I post them. Well, I am not removing them. Minerva Shrine says, the Brits, the plebs, are not amicable about anything connected to Islam. Myself, I welcome some family values via Islam, but the wars and thickness of folk, I see no answer. YT says, so Satanic CDC says there's never been a pandemic, but we must take immense protective measures. I mean, what's going on in the heads of these people? Well, of course, they're making it up as they go along. Oh, there's so much we didn't know about the virus, and there's so much we don't know about it even now. Then why were you so authoritative about this? Starting from what, about February? Everyone must do this or we're all going to die. If you don't know so much about it. Stephen Fry has always given me the creeps, says David Wright. Shrine says that Julie Burchill line is excellent. Fry has been lending support to Extinction Rebellion. Of course he has. Jay Walker says, I've met Stephen Fry, very, very personable, humble man. He's a very odd-looking person with that, massive head, that bobble head, Dragged into work on a night office, of course, wonderful show tonight, Brother Grace. Good evening. Bam says, Head McNeck. Well, sorry, you have to go. The David Bowie appearance in Extras is hilarious, says Metal Mike. It is, because you can see the dilemma that Ricky Gervais's character has. He is being expertly mocked by David Bowie in a room full of people who are egging him on. What's the next insult going to be? And there's a catchphrase, poor little fat man or whatever. And this is excruciating. On the other hand, David Bowie is writing a song about me. So no, that's very good indeed. One thing I hated about Extras was this new trend of bringing in famous people to play themselves, but as monsters. I do not like that. It's been pointed out by others. When William Holden or Charles Boyer would show up on I Love Lucy, they would play genial versions. James Wolcott pointed out genial versions of themselves. This episode of Extras, where Clive Owen, an actor I like, it's some sort of medieval thing, and there's wench parts, some small wench parts, and Ricky Gervais, his Scottish female friend, is cast as one of the wenches. It's the next role, and Clive Owen goes, is this furious rage because she's not good looking enough, and I'm thinking, she's plenty good looking. Only a bad person would carry on in that way. And why would Clive Owen want people to think that he's a bad person? Let's talk about Weasel Ted Wheeler. From the New York Post, Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler moving to avoid rioters targeting his home. And I'm looking at a video here of some incendiary device. The Democratic mayor of Portland, Oregon, is moving from his $840,000 condo to avoid rioters who have repeatedly targeted the building, according to a report. He wrote to neighbors in his building to say it would be, quote, best for me and for everyone else's safety and peace, unquote, for him to move from the building that rioters tried to torch on his 58th birthday Monday. I want to express my sincere apologies for the damage to our home and the fear that you are experiencing due to my position. It is unfair to all of you who have no role in politics or in my administration. Wheeler has faced harsh criticism for his handling of the protests in the City of Roses for 97 consecutive nights since George Floyd's police custody death in Minneapolis in May. I wonder how many people have forgotten that George Floyd has actually anything to do with this. I think the connection between Floyd and the anarchy and sedition on America's streets is becoming more and more tenuous. President Trump on Sunday called him a wacky, radical left, do-nothing Democrat mayor of Portland who has watched great death and destruction of his city during his tenure. Portland's police chief, Chuck Lovell, who's a very strange-looking man, used the arson attack on Wheeler's condo building as proof that the nightly violence is coming at an increased cost. Yeah, when the protesters were only trying to burn dozens of policemen alive, that was one thing. But discomfiting the mayor, that goes too far. Specifically, he said, our elected officials need to do their part to draw a line in the sand and to hold people unaccountable. He was not saying that when on a nightly basis, these anarchists were literally trying to burn several dozen police officers alive. And according to this photo, this Getty photo, which appears in a Breitbart story, Ted Wheeler has not been getting much sleep. He just looks terrible. Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler criticized a local police officer who tackled a rioter on Monday night, tweeting Tuesday that the officer had been filmed repeatedly striking an individual at a protest. Everyone deserves to feel safe in their community. That is what we're supposed to be fighting for. But last night saw more senseless violence in Portland. Another minority-owned local business was destroyed by a violent group of individuals. A police officer was filmed repeatedly striking an individual at a protest. Even the building where I live, along with dozens of other families, was violently attacked. These acts range from stupid to dangerous to criminal. The violence must stop. Minority-owned businesses. Well, the Black population of Portland is 6%. I don't think that there's very many minority-owned businesses. Well, not Black minority-owned businesses. I suspect that there's a lot of Asian minority-owned businesses. But you see, you sort of slip that one in. People hear minority-owned and they think, oh, yes, a Black business. This is terrible. Terrible, terrible, terrible. According to Joel Pollack at Breitbart, Wheeler's description gives the impression that a police officer brutally attacked a peaceful protester without provocation. In fact, the protest was a violent riot. As Andy No reported, the officer was striking a violent rioter who pulled off his helmet and resisted arrest. It's on video. And indeed, it is on video, and I'm looking at it now. A police officer runs ahead of his line, tackles a protester, and starts punching them on the ground. Portland Police Bureau explained a mass gathering devolved into a riot after individuals broke windows, burglarized a building, and lit a fire in an occupied apartment building. How does that not lead to charges for attempted murder? But it's only property. Now, how do we make a distinction between the property, which is not important, and perhaps evil? It's a actual representation, a physical representation of white supremacy, and the people within it. Are the people within these white supremacist buildings, are they tainted by white supremacy? Are they white supremacists by nature of the fact that they live in these evil buildings which have sinister agendas of their own? These buildings are always saying out, don't desecrate me with graffiti, don't burn me down, don't smash my windows. And why are you buildings talking to us like that? You're a little bit too big for your boots there, buildings, as if we're supposed to care about property, as if people and property have any kind of proper relationship. Officers observed someone throwing burning material through a broken window into a ground-level business in a large occupied apartment building. Out of concern that the fire could spread, causing an extreme life safety concern, the incident was declared a riot. Over loudspeaker, participants in the gathering were told that the area was closed to all persons, including media and legal observers, to allow firefighters to respond and extinguish the fires. Few, if any, of the persons complied. Is that what it's going to take? Is it going to take these insurrectionaries on the streets of Portland to prevent fire department to react to fires which they have set? And are we going to need to have 5 or 10 or 20 people roasted to death before the city of Portland begins to take this seriously? Oh, the apartment building in the question was the home of the mayor himself. Yes, law and order for me, but not for thee. So I see Chris Cuomo is in the news, and how he got to be on TV. And I'll repeat my joke because I'm so fond of it, that he looks half the time as if he's about to burst into tears, and the other half of the time, to use words from Dan on Veep, he has the surprised masturbator look. But now apparently he's been accused of sexual harassment. I suppose everyone who works in television has been accused of sexual harassment by now. But the Chris Cuomos of the world never thought that this would come to them. This is big business. It's big business for claimants, and it's big business for lawyers. And CNN, they're always going to pay. They are always going to pay. Look how much Fox News paid. But no, I'm a good guy. I'm an ally. They would never come after me. From the Mail, Trump is called on CNN to fire anchor Chris Cuomo after leaked audio emerged of him denying apparent rumors of sexual misconduct in a secretly recorded phone call with disgraced attorney Michael Cohen. Can we all agree, despite any political differences that we might have, that Michael Cohen is the most despicable man in America? The secret recording of the call between Cuomo and Trump's Disgraced former attorney was released by Fox News host Tucker Carlson last night. Will Fredo be fired by fake news? CNN. He speaks with great disrespect about women, and this will only get worse, Trump tweeted. Fredo's ratings are bad, so this is the time. Always terrible to speak to sleazebags, especially when you are being recorded. CNN has no choice. Fredo must go. Oh, this was a private conversation. Yeah. So was Trump's conversation with Billy Bush. But that didn't stop the Democratic Party, the media, and a lot of Republicans from demanding that Trump drop out of the race in 2016. So let's talk about, Kyle Rittenhouse. His legal firm has released a statement, a very long statement, justifying his actions in Kenosha and providing a timeline. Rittenhouse is being represented by Pierce Bainbridge, who also represented Representative and former presidential candidate Tulsi Gabbard in her suit against Hillary Clinton. Bainbridge is also joined by Nicholas Sandman attorney L. Lynn Wood and several other prominent criminal defense lawyers. And apparently they are working pro bono. Pierce Bainbridge is honored to represent 17-year-old Antioch, Illinois resident Kyle Rittenhouse, who has suddenly found himself at the center of a national firestorm and charged with murder after defending himself from a relentless, vicious, and potentially deadly mob attack in Kenosha. After Kyle finished his work that day as a community lifeguard in Kenosha, he wanted to help clean up some of the damage, so he and a friend went to a local public high school to remove graffiti by rioters. Later in the day, they received information about a call for help from a local business owner whose downtown Kenosha auto dealership was largely destroyed by mob violence. The business owner needed help to protect what he had left of his life's work, that pesky property again, including 2 nearby mechanics shops. Kyle and a friend armed themselves with rifles due to the deadly violence gripping Kenosha and many other American cities and headed to the business premises. The weapons were in Wisconsin and never crossed state lines. And then it goes on to relate what we all know are the details. Kyle did nothing wrong. He exercised his God-given constitutional common law and statutory right to self-defense, so say his lawyers. And depending on how corrupt the judiciary system is, well, that's what it comes down to. How corrupt is the judiciary system? How corrupt is the judiciary system in Minneapolis, where they have overcharged those 4 officers, terribly overcharged them. But they have, Minnesota has an attorney general who is an admitted supporter of Antifa, which of course is an organization that we're told does not exist. William Briggs, the title of today's essay is the answer to the pressing question, what would you do were you Trump? And it begins with that video, which I've talked about, which is a compilation of Democrats and their friends in the media talking about insurrection, rising up, et cetera, openly, again and again and again. And Jason Howerton says, this video is one of the most absolutely brutal things I have ever watched. William Briggs comments, of course, the act of putting down the rabid mob would have been, since I as Trump would have given the relevant orders in Minneapolis, the act would be the end of the beginning of such acts, for once you open fire, you are left with the consequences, all of which require further acts. And those future acts require considerable advanced planning. We covered all those plans in detail in the article about a Trump auto coup. All the obvious measures ensure backing of sufficient numbers of the military, seizing control of broadcast facilities and the internet, et cetera, et cetera. There is no need to repeat them here, except to say my dictatorship, there is no point in euphemism, is going to need a lot of rope. Before you continue, recall there is absolutely no reason to take anything I say with any degree of seriousness. I am one man in a dark corner of the internet, in charge of nothing and nobody, belonging to no organization, wielding no influence and having no official relevance. Not a single soul in all the world is required to heed a single word from me. So if you come here just to be upset and work yourself into a lather, well, it's time to consider a new hobby. Opening fire is what I would do if I were in charge. What you and I ourselves should do is a difficult question. Once again, I should remind this is William Briggs speaking and not myself. Now, it is not legal to riot, burn, loot, pillage, commit mayhem, and murder, even if done in the name of anti-racism or whatever slogan the rabble uses to justify their rapine. It is, however, legal to use force, even deadly force, to quell riots. Further, everybody knows all these things and the reasons behind them, so opening fire is justified, though perhaps not prudent. I say it is prudent, and I hope to convince you of that. And there is the notorious tweet by Chris Cillizza. Did he have anything to do with this? Because the disassociation between his words and the picture below, his words, Trump's efforts to label what is happening in major cities as riots, speaks at least somewhat to his desperation, politically speaking, at the moment. And the picture below is what appears to be an armored police carrier with cops looking on with a block, an entire block on fire. Boy, I sure hope someone got fired for that blunder. Yeah, let's talk about stealing the election, because that's what the Democrats intend to do. As far as they're concerned, the election has already been decided, and they have won. They've won. It's that simple, And the word is from the Democrats, that they're moving in. They are moving in. That's simple. Bill Clinton, this is from the Washington Examiner. He and his wife are increasing their warnings that Trump will not accept defeat in the fall election and will scheme to keep control of the White House. Now, you put this through the projection machine, and what this means is the Democrats are saying that they will not accept defeat in the fall election and will scheme to take control of the White House. In a rare joint interview with American Urban Radio, Washington Bureau Chief April Ryan, Hillary Clinton added to her demands that Joe Biden not concede on election night, and Bill Clinton suggested that Trump will reinforce the White House to keep officials from pulling him out on Inauguration Day. Do not concede under any circumstances, because I believe the other side is going to cheat and sneak and try everything they possibly can, said Hillary Clinton in the COVID Conversations interview broadcast via Instagram. After Ryan joked that Trump's orange knuckles won't let go of his Oval Office desk, Bill Clinton laughed and said he probably won't even come to Biden's inauguration. He'll be stacking sandbags around in the White House. Polls show the race tightening as it moves into the final stage. Most show Biden ahead of Trump. Yes, various polls had the race almost even, and then suspiciously, we get a whole host of polls released in the last couple of days. Biden has an enormous lead, which is, of course, the same trick that they pulled in 2016. Again, very distressing. Majority of Americans intend to vote early this election. 52% of them. This is from NBC News. 52% of adults say they will vote early, with 19% saying they will vote early in person and 33% more saying they will vote by mail. About a third of adults, 33%, say they will vote in person on election day, and 11% say they might not vote at all. 33% voting in person. Well, to the extent that people do not vote in person on election day, the less possibility there is of a fair election. 54% of adults who identify as Republican or lean that way say they will vote in person, while just 22% of Democrats and those who lean Democratic say the same. Democrats are much more likely to vote by mail, with 50% saying that's their plan for November, compared to just 18% of Republicans who say they will mail in their ballots. The election ain't over until November the 3rd, and people should not be allowed to vote in advance unless they have an excellent reason. Again, since apart from special elections, which are rare, election day is known in perpetuity. The only people who should be allowed to vote remotely and not on the election day are serving members of the military and members of diplomatic staff. I'm sorry. If you aren't willing to reschedule your vacation or your business trip, I guess you don't really want to vote for president. Judge Napolitano explains if Pelosi could become acting president if election results are delayed past January 20th. Yeah, apparently the story goes, at least is what Trump says, that he thought that he would receive some sort of preferment in Trump's cabinet. He did not get it, and he became a vociferous opponent of Trump. Acting president. These people are really cheering for a civil war, aren't they? It might be right, Napolitano told host Stuart Varney. Trump's term ends at precisely noon on January 20th, 2021. If the Electoral College has not yet named a successor, presumably either Donald Trump or Joe Biden, then whoever is the Speaker of the House would become acting president of the United States. He explained if the Democrats retain the majority in the House, and it appears likely that they will, but if they do, and if they choose Mrs. Pelosi, knowing at that point that they're choosing the President of the United States, then it would be she. Yeah, Americans wake up one day to find out that Nancy Pelosi is the president, and of course, they're just going to sit back and accept that, right? Democrats could choose someone else, and the Republicans could have the majority if they flip the House in November. The judge had stated simply, whoever is the sitting Speaker of the United States would become president at noon on that day. We're being set up here, folks. We're being set up for a coup, or a counter coup, or for a civil war, or for widespread insurrection, because it was Hillary's turn in 2016, and it's Joe Biden's turn in 2020, and the Democrats do not like losing their terms. I've spoken about this story again, but I'm going to mention it because it is terribly important, because the plan has been laid out. The plan is in the public domain. This is from Mediaite. President Donald Trump is likely going to win big on election night, including in traditionally Democratic states such as Minnesota and Virginia, but will lose the election a week later because of mail-in voting, according to a Democratic pollster. We are sounding an alarm and saying this is a very real possibility that the data is going to show on election night an incredible victory for Donald Trump, Hawkfish CEO Josh Mendelson said in an interview with Axios on HBO. One scenario modeled by Mendelson's polling firm even shows Trump prevailing in the Electoral College on election night, winning 408 electoral votes compared to just 130 for Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden. The model shows Biden winning California, New York, Colorado, Oregon, and the state of Washington. So it's going to be like the 2018 midterms. Oh, a good night for the Republicans. Oh, and then a day later, 2 days later, 3 days later, 4 days, 6, 7, 8, etc. Wow, the Republicans got stomped. Ballot harvesting, they call it. How could something called ballot harvesting be considered anything other than fraud? How could it be? The markets, of course, are aware of this. JP Morgan says key markets priced in contested election risk. Pricing for volatility protection and interest rates is very high relative to the same stage in previous cycles. Yeah, okay. What do they consider volatility to be? Do they consider it to be Donald Trump refusing to leave the White House? Or military units being sent to remove Donald Trump from the White House? Is that how they consider what they consider volatility to be? I really don't think so. I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen, but force majeure. All things are off. That's what's being not hinted at. That's what we're being told. All bets are off. Nancy Pelosi as president. I'm running a little late today, and so I'm not going to get to the segment about religion. I guess I'll talk about more hype, ridiculous hype from Prince Harry and Meghan Mertz. This is, again, from the U.S. Sun. Meghan Mertz and Harry set to rake in up to 75 million pounds. That's about 150 million American dollars. After signing staggering Netflix mega deal to become producers, experts say. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex, who have never produced a TV show, will make documentaries, films, scripted, and kids programs. Oh, and there's a little cartoon here. I can't wait to play myself in The Crown. The couple who quit royal duties in March said they wanted their impactful outfit to unlock action. Unlock action. How about unleash action and give hope? Their lives have allowed us to understand the power of the human spirit. Oh, shut up. Of courage, resilience, and the need for connection. Their pals, the Obamas, also first-time producers, reportedly received up to $74 million in a similar Netflix deal in 2018. Before signing with Netflix, Harry and Meghan held talks with Disney and Apple, the New York Times reports. If you've been following the Netflix story, you know that this company is leveraged to the hilt. They keep ladling out the dosh in outrageous amounts, and they don't have the money to pay for it. They just keep borrowing and borrowing and borrowing, and it's a Ponzi scheme. It's a Ponzi scheme. Now, I read on Crazy Days and Nights that apparently Prince Harry has been proposing. He's got all these pitches, which I suppose is related to this supposed Netflix deal. Action movies, comedies, and Sedan said that they were all terrible. But I just get the impression that this could be Netflix simply embiggening things to make this story look bigger than it is. You'd have to be a moron to give Megan Mertz and her consort $150 million for anything to do with show business. These people have been unable to make themselves a viable media property in the United States. Yeah, COVID-19. I noticed that Megan Thee Stallion has had a very good year, as has Cardi B. And they lack the advantages that Harry and Meghan have. They have been an absolute failure from the time that they left Britain to move to Vancouver Island. Oh, we hate the paparazzi. Yeah, of course you do. And then moved to Los Angeles for some reason, and to sue the Daily Mail and to sue a photography service and to be given $15 million to buy a house in Los Angeles, even as they owe the British taxpayer millions for Frogmore Cottage. I think this is just hype. That, but you put out numbers like this, they're actually worth that much, and thus you get other people sucked in and throwing good money after bad. I'm going to have a final look at the chat here. I'll get back to what I didn't talk about today. I will talk about tomorrow. Aslan says, no Cardi B talk, please. Well, keeping to a minimum. It's going to hit the fan come what may on November 4th, says Yo Mama. Yeah, I think that's a good prediction. To quote my favorite state politician ever, why build a zoo when we just put up a fence around Chapel Hill? Thank you for tuning in, MCT. Yeah, I could, if I wanted to totally alienate my audience, I could use the word or the neologism that supposedly Prince Charles used to describe Harry's infatuation with Meghan Mertz. Blunt and shocking, actually, but I won't do that. You could look it up. I think plenty of Americans would accept Nancy the Ghoul as president in that scenario. Yeah, I'm just imagining, the worst case scenario, that she gets appointed interim president and then she swiftly dies, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg hasn't been seen for months. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is being held in a secure, unknown location. Senate ticket, Biden and Lugosi. You mentioned the Clinton crime family, and the bots and trolls are instantaneous, says Chogokin 666. Yes, we have a lot of deletions here. Wow. Dozens and dozens and dozens. Okay. Debrea says, LOL, China condemned the breach of human rights against Antifa and BLM. You can't make that up. Metal Mike says maybe China is funneling money to these Stalinist groups. To what extent, I think there's some organization going on, but there's a lot of self-organization. I mean, these people have been working, learning about anarchism, looking about what can be done on the local level for quite a few years now. And there's a lot of stuff that you can find online, even in books, and they have this chud army. Every city, even Portland, has a chud army. Oh yes, resistance, fight the power, burn it down. This is the result of a large-scale collapse of society. These people are useless. They have no purpose, and they get enough money from governments to keep themselves alive. And I guess they want to make a difference, and the only way they can make a difference is to dance. Well, gurning as the DJ plays before the nightly riot, and then they go on the nightly riot. They're not getting anything out of this. There's no situation in which they would benefit by their actions. None whatsoever. And that's the show for today. I'll be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. As mentioned previously, tomorrow I'm going to be discussing a movie about World War II, which few people in the West had seen until the last couple of years. It is called Come and See, which is a reference to the book of Revelation. Yeah, and it's the references is deliberate and to the point. If you like the show or any part of it, I'd appreciate it if you'd click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not already done so. If you would like to contribute to this channel, which would be greatly appreciated, especially at this time of flux in my life, my PayPal address is kevin_grace@hotmail.com. Once again, kevin_grace@hotmail.com. If you're Canadian, you can send money to me directly through Interac at kevingrace@shaw.ca. And finally, in these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly hope that you, my dear listeners and viewers, manage to forge a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.